Hello, everyone. Welcome to a special CODEX station presentation. I'm your host, Sonny Kruger, and I'm here interviewing the award-winning writer, Olivia Cuartero-Briggs.
Hello.
Glad to have you here, Olivia. Thank you for joining us. Olivia has written quite a few things like Silver City, Jill and the Killers, Mary Shelley, Monster Hunter, and most recently, Fate, the Winx Saga, Volume 1, Dark Destiny.
Yes, and it's worth saying that we're actually recording this on the official pub day.
Yes, yeah, I was looking. I was like,
About
when does it
today.
come out? And then I was like, yeah, so today. So today, Fate the Wing Saga Volume 1 is available to buy pretty much all over in most places you can buy books, right?
Yeah. What's really fun about this is my first official graphic novel. Of course, I've had trade paperbacks come out, but not a graphic novel. So this one's actually in places like Barnes and Noble and like classic bookstores, which is a childhood dream of mine. So I went to Revenge of this morning and signed the copies that they have, but I'm looking forward to going to Barnes and Noble later today and actually seeing my book on shelves. It's super exciting.
Awesome. Congratulations. Yeah,
Thank you.
a dream accomplished. You can check that one off the
Yes.
list.
Bucket list.
Yes. Yeah, so Olivia, I will start us off with some of the usual questions. So the first one I have for you is, how did you get into writing?
How did I get into writing? It's a very interesting question. How did I not get into writing might be the better way of saying that. I have actually, this is going to sound so obnoxious, but I've been writing kind of ever since I knew how. I remember very vividly when I was it must have been like second grade because it was before I could read. And I would ride the subways. I'm from New York City originally. And I remember sitting on the subway and looking up at the advertisements and just wishing so badly that I knew how to read all of them because I could not wait to write my first novel, um, which I did in third grade. And I still have it, and it's terrible. Um, but I've always been a storyteller, and also in that epic third grade year, which was probably pretty defining. I happened to have a teacher who very graciously would allow me to sit everybody down, turn out the lights, and I would kind of stand in the middle of this circle of kids and tell them horror stories. And
Nice. Nice feature.
I
Yeah,
loved
like
horror. Horror was my first love. And Fate the Wing Saga has a lot of scary elements, so it's been fun to come back to that. And some of the other work that's been coming my way has been in the horror genre as well. So I feel like I'm coming home, but it was really gratifying. I'm dating myself here, but who cares? I had my 20th high school reunion not long ago, and one of the women who was there is now a published author who I've read her books. She's incredibly talented. Her name is Rachel Lyon. She's really, really good. Her latest book just came out this past year, Fruit of the Dead, and she remembered when I used to sit everyone down in third grade and tell these stories, and that was one of her very vivid memories of me. So that was really cool. Um,
no, you continued
but
on with it. You continued on with the writing. Didn't never give up.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, my life has taken twists and turns since. I think for a long time, my father was a set designer in the theater. Spent a lot of time acting. I think for a long time, I thought that acting was the career and writing was just this thing that I did. And as life went on, and I ended up moving to Hollywood and did the whole auditioning thing, and um, I kind of had this very revelatory moment of I remember I was walking down Hollywood Boulevard and I was getting catcalled, and I was so mad about it at the time, and I thought, I don't want to be looked at. What am I doing trying to get this acting career going? I don't want to be recognizable. I don't want to be seen on that level. And I worked in the film and television industry right out of undergrad, and it just kind of like everything kind of came together in like one magical moment over with events that transpired over a couple of years. And then all of a sudden it just dawned on me that this thing that I'd always been doing, that no one ever had to pay me for, that I loved, that's probably the career right there. So I went back to school for graduate school, and got my degree in dramatic writing from NYU Tisch. They had a campus in Singapore at the time. And got my degree there, and I really lucked out. I actually started out working in film and television, and the way that comic books ended up happening, I never thought in a million years that I would be a comic book writer. I didn't think growing up that comics were for me, outside of Betty and Veronica, right? Because it was all superheroes back then. I'm a '90s kid, and if there were women on the cover, they had really big boobs and were very scantily.
Oh yeah.
This is clearly
Barely wore any outfits to go get in a fist fight,
yeah. And again, to the office, to what you just said, it always looked very precarious to me to be fighting anyone without good breast covering. That just seems ill-advised to me.
And then us guys, we get to wear the underwear over our pants. We're really covered up, yeah.
That's true, yes. And the underwear over the pants, yes. So that came about when a television show that I was working on had gotten canceled, and I freaked out, and I called who was then my good friend Adam Glass, who's worked in comics for many, many years as well as television. And he said, well, look, I don't have anything for you in TV right now, but I've been dying to write this book, Mary Shelley Monster Hunter, but it needs a female voice. Would you do this with me? And I completely fell in love with the medium. I mean, I think it had a lot to do with the fact that I was getting mentored by someone who is so imaginative, so kind, so collaborative, and had so much experience. I think that was really helpful. Yeah, that book was enough to have me hooked. And I've been writing for comics ever since, and I don't plan on stopping anytime soon. So it was a very, very happy accident that I ended up in this world, and as things have developed, Fate the Wing Saga. This is my first book that I'm writing based on pre-existing IP. So this is it's part of my evolution as a comic book writer, and it's been very revelatory and really fun, very eye-opening. It's been quite the experience.
Okay, well, even too, I'm a huge fan of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. So one of the questions was going to be, what made you decide to take on Mary Shelley in the story? So that marks off one of those questions. But to focus again a little more bit on Fate the Wing Saga, is how did you go straight into that? What is the story behind you getting into Fate the Wing Saga? Because I know first it was a Netflix series, and then now it's a comic book that you have written.
Well, this might be kind of boring and businessy, but for any creators out there, the way that this particular book came about is Mike Martz, who was the editor-in-chief at Aftershock Comics. They were the first to publish me. I tell Mike he's my dad in comics. He's not really old enough to be my dad, but he's my dad in comics. He was the first editor to ever publish me. He ended up moving over to Mad Cave Studios as their editor-in-chief. And so, of course, I was intrigued. What is Mad Cave Studios? What are these people doing? And come to find out, they were, and they still are expanding astronomically. Then they had Maverick, which is their YA imprint, the publisher of Fate the Wing Saga, as well as Paper Cuts, which is their middle grade imprint. And I was just fascinated with this company, and I had to know more. And another editor, Christina Harrington, who I had worked with at Aftershock, had gone over there also. And I told them, I said, listen, I want to work with you guys. What's going on here seems awesome. And one of the first things they came to me with, it was actually kind of funny. They were like, okay, well, we have the rights to this book, and we need you to write it in about 7 or 8 months, and because it needs to come out by next Christmas. And I was like, oh, okay. And at the time, I was not familiar with Fate the Wing Saga or Winx Club. I didn't really know anything about it. So before I agreed, obviously, I watched the show. I watched all 2 seasons.
It's some binge watching to do, huh? Yeah.
Serious binge watching, but it was easy. And I'll tell you, I've had a lot of staffing meetings for television shows and I'm really diligent about it. If I have a staffing meeting, even if I don't know if I'm going to be that into the show, I will watch every episode before that staffing meeting so that I'm as absolutely prepared as I can be. And I've really done my due diligence, and sometimes it's quite painful. This was not. Anyone who's heard me speak about the show, I always ding them on budget, because I don't feel like Netflix gave them what they needed to really make that show what it could have been. But I do think that the creators, the writers, the cast, I think what they did more than I ever could have imagined with what they had to work with. And as someone who works in TV, like when you're watching it, you can tell. You're like, okay, clearly you didn't have the budget for that scene, but I thought they wrote around it beautifully. And something that I thought that they did really well was, the tendency with a lot of these larger concept projects, we're in a magic school, and we have fairies, and we have superpowers, and we have various creatures that are attacking. And I see the tendency a lot is to lean on plot and those larger elements of story. But what Fate the Winx Saga did so masterfully that I really loved and connected with is that they focused on character, and not just character, but the kind of depth and nuance and drama of the teen experience. And that is what defined the tone, and to me a lot of what drove the plot. And so for that reason, I was hooked into it. And how every single plot point was just designed to bring out more of these characters' past, to trigger them emotionally, and then to watch them make both calculated and emotional decisions. And that's who teenagers are. And that's why teen stories are so delicious, and why we love going back to them even as adults, is how wonderful it was to live in that emotionally driven space. The difference, of course, here is that like they're fighting for their lives and their school and their futures.
Yeah, so
While
cool, a
being
mixture of the teen drama,
yeah,
but also a bit of fun in the action and fantasy. Yeah.
yeah. So I thought that they blended that beautifully. I thought that the casting was tremendous. So yeah, it was an easy yes for me in that regard. So that's how the project came to be. I was invited to take a look at this IP, and I took on the challenge, even though I was unfamiliar with the show to begin with. But I very quickly became a fan, and I had a lot of fun. I really, as I said, the tone of the show I thought was really, really special. And so every time I went to write any of these books, even just from the outlining stages, I had a playlist that I had taken from the show, all the songs from the show, the score from the show, and then a lot of Spotify recommendations in the same vein. And I listened to it every time that I wrote, because for me with these books, the tone was so important.
Yes, the music really sets the tone when you're right. It
Oh yeah.
really gets you in the vibe. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's it was convenient. They had it right there, and they liked my voice for it, and it ended up just kind of being a harmonious union in that way.
Nice. And since you said that they gave you they said 7 to 8 months, how long did it take you to write?
Well, that's kind of hard to say because, well, first of all, the publication date ended up being, where are we now? It was like 8 or 9 months after the initial proposed,
Oh,
for various reasons, which actually I will say for myself had nothing to do with the writing of the project. But because we have obviously Rainbow is involved in this, so there's a lot of stages that every part of this book has to go through, a lot of boxes to be checked, because obviously Maverick has to sign off, Rainbow has to sign off, and so that can be a bit of a lengthy process. And then on top of that, I think the latest publication delay was due to the fact that there was just a lot more demand, which is so cool, than they
it's
had
a good thing. Yeah.
anticipated. So yes, they wanted to push back to make sure that they had enough books available. So champagne problems. But the actual writing of the books, it's hard to say, because there are 2 volumes, and I outlined them as one continuous arc. So for those of you who have picked up the book, I'm sorry. For those of you who will pick up the book, just wait. There's a huge cliffhanger at the end of the first volume that carries you into the second, because the 2 volumes really are one big long arc. So it's hard to say exactly how long it took me, but I mean, I will say on average, I mean, this is kind of like my little secret that I don't always tell my editors, but I'm a pretty quick writer. But it's, I'm balancing many projects at any given time. So it's often that I will write a chapter and I will send that off for notes, and then go to tackle something else until the notes come in. And then I have to get whatever's on my plate off of it in order to, service this. So probably all told, the first volume was, maybe like 6 or 7 weeks with outlining.
Okay.
Don't factor in some of the other projects, but yeah.
Okay. And I'm glad to hear that there is a volume 2, because I was
Oh,
able
of
to
course,
check it
yeah.
out.
I'm hoping that we get to do a volume 3. I was asking at San Diego Comic-Con. I was like, what number do we need to hit in order to get a volume 3? And they're going to be looking at it, especially over the next few weeks, because apparently, like I said, the order numbers were very healthy. So it's looking good for a volume 3. But because, volumes 1 and 2, that's one arc, I would like to be able to do one big arc for volume 3. So I'll probably scare them when I tell them this, but I would love for volume 3 to be twice as long as volume 1.
Nice. Well, that's good. Glad to hear, and that is awesome to hear for Fate the Winged Saga fans.
Yeah.
So, speaking of the story, Olivia, since you have taken on LGBTQ plus themes in your work, I was going to ask, have you received any criticism because of it?
Interestingly, no, there's been no criticism at all over the, I think, specifically what you're talking about is the Kat Tara relationship. Actually, it's been widely celebrated. And what's interesting is that Christiane, who did the illustrations for this, is queer as well. And she put so much love into these scenes, and they jump off the page, and the intimacy between them is so tangible, so much more than I ever anticipated.
You feel the love when you see
illustrations. Yes, it feels real, it feels powerful, and that was a very, very precious storyline to me. I put a lot of the personal experiences and issues that I was having with my current partner into that. And I think, I mean, again, I think, especially for fans of the series, Tara coming out in season 2, that was always a part of the story. I feel like if you're inherently, for whatever dumb reason, turned off by queer romances, you're probably not going to be a Winx fan to begin with. But I think, I hope that in part the support behind that storyline is due to the fact that both Christiane and I just loved them so much and wanted that relationship to feel really real. Another thing about it that, I thought was vital is, we've had a lot of coming out stories in media. And there was a time where that was really important. And the coming out stories are still important because it's not like it's easy to come out for everyone, right? We've advanced in some ways, but clearly we are still very delayed in others. So that is still something that a lot of people struggle with, and I've had my own struggles with it. But I think it's also important, very important now, to have representations of queer couples just trying to make it work, like anyone, everyone. And you can always relate to two people who love each other dearly, trying to connect with all of the baggage that they bring to the relationship, some of which they're not even aware of, and all the fears and crap that gets in the way of just being with the person that you love. And I think that, having those kinds of universal themes in this queer relationship that, again, was handled with such love and such care is it is my hope that that is what is so compelling about this relationship, and why we really know there's been no backlash that I know of about the relationship. There's been backlash about other things and certain plot points that I chose. We've had some issues in terms of, there's certain characters we can use, there's certain characters we can't. We don't have the rights to the entire Winx catalog of characters, unfortunately. So there were some choices that we had to make, some things that were set up by the show, but we had to make different choices in order to, realize some of those cool elements that were introduced, just not the way that the audience might have expected. But I thought they were too juicy to ignore. And so, some of those things have been controversial for fans, but gratefully not Tara and Kat.
I'm very happy to hear it. That is
yes,
good. It shows we're making progress as people,
We are, and we will continue to. I know sometimes it feels like, man, we're moving backwards, but I don't think that that's the case. I think that we are slowly moving to a more accepting community across the board. At least, I don't know. But then again, people always remind me, like, I'm from New York City and I live in Los Angeles, so I'm in bubbles. But I see my daughter's generation. She's 10, my older daughter, her and her friends, and it is such a non-issue for them how people identify, who they love, who their parents love. People are people to them, and it's really, really gratifying to see that and to know that
It
I'm going
is.
to get to start to write for these kids soon. So
Yeah. So great news. It is happy. Great to hear that we're all, like I said, people are making progress and everything is being more accepted. Like I said, I grew up too in the '90s, so I remember too. Like I said, when people
oh
coming out
yeah,
was like a huge thing. It was not often. But see that
it
we're
was a
making
very different
progress.
world back then when we grew up, but we made it. We survived.
Yes. So glad to hear it, and glad that we get to talk about it. And another day we'll be like, oh, you remember when it was even kind of a conversation, you know? But
Yeah.
speaking of the story, I was going to say, do you have any favorite characters?
Um, I will. I like I said, I have an acting background, and I thought the casting for this was tremendous for the television show. But the actress whose talent just kind of blazed across the screen for me the most was the actress who played Tara. So Tara became a favorite of mine in large part because I felt like the actress was so incredibly talented. So I really, again, wanted to give her a very, very juicy storyline. Another character that I absolutely love and she was probably my favorite to write for is Aisha, because she has such a fab. She's very focused. She's very serious. She's one of those characters that the moment that she's introduced on screen, you know exactly what she wants and how she plans on getting it. She's very purposeful like that, which is something that I'm very attracted to. Not just in terms of storytelling because it's very clear, but also in terms of people. I really like those kinds of focused people. But she has such great comedic timing and a really wonderful sense of humor in spite of how serious she is. And she just seems like someone that I would love to have lunch with. So writing her dialogue was so fun for me. That mix of seriousness and jokes, and also not being afraid to be the person in the room who's saying exactly how what they think and feel.
Usually it's like what
Very
everybody feels, but there's always like a lot of people keep it in, and then sometimes there needs to
Yep.
be that one person to speak up.
And a lot of times teenagers don't. I mean, they don't say exactly what they're feeling. But what I like about Aisha is that she's different that way, and she's not afraid of what people think of her. She's going to get her shit done. So yeah, in terms of like dialogue writing, I always looked forward to whatever quip I could put in, how feisty she was, how fiery. And then Stella is a really attractive character for me too because she's so complicated. I mean, what was set up again in the series, which I thought was so brilliant, was this young woman who really had a kind heart, but for, you know, for very specific reasons, really was put in this position where she had to kind of make herself look and seem bad because she had accidentally blinded someone, but it couldn't be known that that was an accident. So she kind of had to embody this dark side of herself it was very disingenuous to who she was, for the sake of her family and all of that. And I just thought that that was so interesting. The crush that she seemed to have on Sky, there's something so heartbreaking about her. She seemed so vulnerable, and yet she was being used in a lot of circumstances and in ways that she felt like she had to support her users. And I thought there was something so inherently female about that experience of people pleasing to the extent where you begin to do things that are contrary to who you are as a person. And I am a woman, and now at my advanced age, having been a 90s kid, you really do start to look back and realize that a lot of the things, the ways that you think, the ways that you act are based on a set of expectations that were placed on you. And the job then becomes sorting through that. And okay, which ones of these do I like and feel honest, and which ones don't? And that, and again, if they're, for folks who are reading the books, you'll see that what the journey that Stella goes through, it's again, this is character driving plot. It's very emblematic of an identity crisis. She's literally pretending to be someone else because she's being pressured to do that, right? So, but my hope is that, if I do get a volume 3, to be able to explore Stella finally making choices for Stella, and what that will mean. So yeah, those are my, and of course, I love Bloom. She was another very nice brooding character to tackle. But in terms of the characters that I had the most fun writing for and coming up with stories for, those 3 are front and center.
Okay. And if you were to have the powers of, let's say, a fairy, what would be the first thing you would do?
What if I could pick any power? Like, what would it be?
Any of them? What would it be, and what would you do? What would be the first thing you do?
Oh my gosh, this is really difficult. I mean,
this was supposed to be the fun question. Don't worry about it. Don't.
I know. I'm thinking way too hard about it. I mean, right now you're catching me. I've been away from home for like 5 weeks, and I just got back a few days ago, and I have been missing my dogs so much. And one of them he's sleeping right here on the floor. He's my first big dog, and training him has been really difficult. I love him to pieces. So the first thing I thought of is like, I would love to have the power to communicate with animals on their level and just have like an entire house full of dogs.
Yeah, I may have to take your answer for myself too. That's a good answer. The perfect answer, yeah.
Yeah, I'm a little obsessed with dogs.
No problem. Same here, so we're all good. We've had dogs appear on the CODEX station before. Every now and then somebody's dog will come in. We'll hear a few, so you're all good there. You fit right in with us.
Yay.
All right. So the next question was about the Mary Shelley story, but we had already gone over that, how you got into it. But what I was going to ask is, since you also have done some writing for television, you've written for shows like The Arrangement and Queen of the South, was how did you get into writing for television?
That's another Adam Glass story.
All good.
Yeah, Adam Glass has been my introduction to comics, and he was the person to help me get my first job in television. But it was interesting. Like I said, when I was in my mid-20s, that's when it became very clear to me that I was a writer and that I was a dramatic writer. So I decided to go back to school. I thought at the time that I wanted my focus to be screenwriting. Most of what I had been watching was movies, and I just figured that that's what I should be writing. That was where most of my experience had been before going to graduate school, was screenwriting. But while I was in school, there was a very interesting shift that was beginning to happen. Now, it happened before I went to college, but it really started to gain momentum. So, back in the very early 2000s, or maybe even earlier than that. I forget what year The Sopranos first came out. It must have been in the very late 90s, because
I think 99, something like that.
Yeah, I hadn't graduated from high school just yet. But television shows, because of HBO, they started to become cinematic and really deep. And shows like 6 Feet Under, The Sopranos, they really started to, and The Wire as well, they really started to change the game in terms of what television storytelling could be. And because the way that the production worked, it was less expensive. You didn't need to appeal to as broad an audience to still have a hit show on your hands. And so the storytelling became much more niche. And I've always been a niche storyteller. And so when I was in graduate school and taking these various classes, I started to realize, wait a minute, I feel like right now TV is where it's at. I want to try this on for size. And that was when The Newsroom had come out. I don't know if anyone is familiar with The Newsroom. It was an Aaron Sorkin show. I loved it. That first season blew my mind. That speech about America. Again, I'm in Singapore at the time, and I'm incredibly homesick for the first time in my life. Being a New Yorker, I'd always been like, America, whatever. And then all of a sudden, I'm an expat in a foreign country, and I'm like, I miss America. And so, but hearing it spoken about that way, and watching this show about people trying to save it and how compelling it was, I was like, this is what I want to do. So I wrote my first spec script, which was an episode of The Newsroom. Oh, Aaron Sorkin, if you're listening, which you're not, I would love for you to read it someday. Just, forgive me, I was in graduate school at the time, but you taught me how to write TV. And yes, the script was 90 pages long.
At least nowadays in television, it's more normal for an episode to kind of go, like before episodes were like 53 minutes or they were 23
Yes,
minutes.
for
Now, if
broadcast, yeah.
yeah, it's fine for stuff to go, they could be
Well,
50, they
no,
could be an
a
hour and 10.
90-page Sorkin script would be an hour of television because of how fast everybody talks in those.
Yes, there you go.
So yeah, I started to fall in love with the medium, especially hour long. So by the time I graduated, well, right before I graduated, we had thesis panelists come out. So I was still in screenwriting at the time, and so met with that thesis panelist. But I knew that this guy named Adam Glass, who was at the time, he was the co-EP of a show called Supernatural, which some of you might know.
It's had a few seasons,
just a few, never ended. So insane.
A couple hundred episodes.
Yeah. And so I looked at my then husband at the time who had come out with me to Singapore, poor thing. And I said, we are going to make friends with this man. And we did. He came out with his wife. We took them out to this great whiskey bar in Singapore. The entire school ended up finding out where we were and ended up joining. It was an amazing night. And we kept in touch. When I graduated, I came back to New York City. I produced a few plays that I had written off Broadway. And I had my first daughter. And so it was about a year after I had graduated that Adam called me and he said, look, I'm working on the show Criminal Minds Beyond Borders. I'm co-show running. Do you want to come out and be the writer's assistant? And I think I got the job on a Monday. By the following Saturday, I was on a plane, husband, baby, dog, having all of our stuff shipped cross country. And I did that first season of the show as a writer's assistant. And I can still remember at this point, I had listened to so many hours of the Nerdist Writers Panel, that podcast, any podcast I could get my hands on. All I wanted to learn about was what it was like to be a writer in a writer's room. And it seemed like the best thing in the world to me. And I had spent so many days in Washington Heights in my apartment thinking, how am I ever going to break in? So I still remember the day that I'm in these offices at CBS Radford and I see the writers walking down the hallway and I swear they were like walking in slow motion. They were like my superheroes. So yeah, that was my first job in TV. And then, as you said, I went on to work on a show called The Arrangement and Queen of the South. And actually, I also worked on Mike Schur's ill-fated Field of Dreams, which was the last show that I was on.
Oh, okay.
The plug pull heard around the world, but it happens to even the best showrunners in the business we would write all the scripts. They built the fields and everyone left. Yeah, TV, it's a wonderful place to be. It's also very, very competitive. And if you do have aspirations to be a television writer, I would just advise, always have your own projects going on and also find other mediums to, keep the muscle warm at all times, always be developing, but also, embrace other mediums as well, because, as you know or may not know, the industry now is experiencing a real lull. We had a pandemic, as did we all. We had a massive writer strike and SAG went on strike. So a lot of money has been lost and we are still in the process of rebuilding. I think production, last I heard, production was down 40%, which is very significant. Wow. So, we're coming back. I have lots of projects in development. I always will. Some that I'm very, very excited about that may be taking place in Scotland, which would be so cool.
Wow. Can you tell us anything about that or?
It's totally unannounced. So I can't say too much except that it's a very, very, very dark comedy. I have an incredible team I'm developing with the folks over at Black Camel who do a show called Annika. If you've seen it, it's a great police procedural, but I feel like it's made for people that don't usually like procedurals because I love it. Oh, okay. And it's Nicola Walker stars in it. She's incredibly talented, breaks the fourth wall, talks directly to you. She's very savvy. It's all about the relationship between her and her daughter. And I'm a sucker for mother-daughter relationship shows. That's because I'm obsessed with my relationship with my own kids. So yeah, that's a project I'm very, very excited about that's got some heat around it. So let's hopefully, it sees the light of day, but my goodness, it's the same thing in comics. I mean, there's so many steps that something needs to go through in order to see the light of day. And it really, really is a process. The thing is though, with comic books and traditional novels in the publishing space, obviously it's a lot cheaper to make things. So you're going to get a lot more stories and a lot more original stories. And what's so great about comics for creators is you can really let your imagination run wild. And if you have the right team of editors behind you, which I have been fortunate enough to have at multiple places at this point, you really can, you know, explore the depths of your own imagination and your life experience and just kind of soul vomit all over the pages, which
Yeah,
is
you don't have to worry much about special effects in a, a comic book.
no,
Yeah.
no. All you have to worry about is getting the right artist who can pull off your vision. For me, because I'm only a writer. I really like working with other artists. I think it's these mediums they're the best. I think when they're collaborative, it's why TV got so good and is so good. It's because it's it's a whole writer's room and you have a whole creative team behind you. Comic books, working with editors, artists, everyone putting their minds together to bring this thing to life. I really do think that that's why comic books and graphic novels have, I mean, if you look at where we've come since we were kids, like,
oh yeah,
there is a whole universe out there now. It's become the prime spot for original storytelling. And it's very, very powerful. And also I learned that it's now, more and more schools are encouraging their students to read graphic novels as opposed to traditional novels, because it facilitates so much more emotional learning and literacy. And I just think that that's brilliant.
it is.
I'm very
glad
happy.
to say us comic book fans have won. We have taken over.
We're totally winning. Yes, we are.
So I'm glad to hear, glad to, that you mentioned that in school. And before I move on, you mentioned 6 Feet Under. That's one of my all-time favorites.
So
and
good.
I'll try not to talk to you too much about it, but I'd be able to go on. This interview can go on for hours talking about 6 Feet Under.
So good.
I'll just have to move on.
Peter Krause was like my first like real deal TV crush.
Oh, Nate.
He's so good.
Oh, Nate. But the whole cast is incredible.
I had a dream once. This is when I was acting really seriously when I was in college at Oberlin. And I had this dream that I was talking to Rachel Griffiths. And I was like, she played Brenda on the show.
And I was Brenda? Was she like Brenda in the dream?
Sort of, except, not as much of a delinquent. She was just like a chill lady. And I was like, how did you know that in every scene you were nailing it? And she said, I didn't. And at the time, it was so revelatory for me as an actress that, like, you don't know. You're just invested in the circumstances of, of the scene that you're doing and your scene partner. You don't know that you're nailing it. Just let that go. So yeah, she gave me acting advice in my dreams.
Nice, a little bit of dreamland here in our interview. Yeah. All right. So yeah, it's awesome. It's an awesome dream. Maybe I'll have some dreams too about meeting some other celebrities, some huge actors and actresses to give me some advice. Okay, speaking of advice though, do you have any advice? I know you're giving some you were saying about writers in television, but do you have any advice for any aspiring writers, whether it be in television or comic books, or just any advice you have?
Oh gosh, I always have tons. I think if you do want to have, a career as a writer in any medium, you really, really have to get comfortable with hearing no. And the fact that it can take a long time to bring projects to fruition. And if you can kind of wrap your head around both of those things and not take that part of the process personally, then you can really, really enjoy a tremendous amount of creativity. And in comic books specifically, the community, and I'm not talking solely about the fans. I'm talking about the people who spend their lives working in comics, the people who own publishing companies, the editors, the sales and marketing people. They are incredibly passionate and warm and thrilled to be doing what they're doing, which is tremendous, because in publishing, there's not a lot of money in books. So it's not like these people are smiling because their pockets are filled with cash. Like,
yeah, we need to get more people reading. Yeah.
Yeah. They're happy because they are they are a part of a storytelling culture that is moving the needle in really, really powerful ways. Whether it's for more inclusion, diversity, recognition, normalization, whatever you want to call it. And also, really, like I said before, comics is a place where creators can really, really be creative without, the confines of budgetary concerns or trying to appeal to a mass market. Comic books are so successful because they are niche. They are niche, right? And we can do
Mhm.
that because the production is relatively cheap. Um, so yeah, if you can handle hearing no a lot, if you can handle the fact that like you're gonna have to come up, your brain's gonna have to be flexible. You're gonna have to come up with a bunch of different ideas. You're also going to have to sell your ideas. It's so weird to think of myself as like, mostly you think of like salespeople, like they're peddling wares, right? But I peddle ideas, and you cannot be precious about any single one. There's some ideas that I have right now that I'm absolutely in love with, that I'm actively trying to find homes for, but they're not every idea is for every publisher. Someone might have something similar. They might not get it. It might not be in their wheelhouse. Being able to clearly communicate your idea is very important. Being able to connect it to something personal that you're going through is very important. But you can do all of those things and it can still not work. And what am so fascinated by currently is that there's also a massive movement in comic books and graphic novels of self-publishing, which is no longer stigmatized. Kickstarter has become, I think, the fourth largest distribution platform, and
Wow.
one in which creators are making a lot more money than they are with traditional publishers. So, and what that says about the readership in the community is that they are in full support of creators creating, and I can't think of anything better than that. That is
That's
that
so
is
good. Yeah,
incredible.
it is.
So,
Gives everybody a chance.
but I will say that if you are interested in being a comic book writer, I don't know that as a comic book writer you can really make a living solely doing that. So you might need a side hustle or a side job. There's not a lot of money in it until you get to the point where something of yours gets licensed or becomes a television show, or of course there's always money in getting that option and having your IP live on. um, but yeah, you will need other financial support definitely starting out. And for, let's see, when did I have my first book come out? It was like 2018 or 2019. Yeah, not making a living yet. So, for the foreseeable future.
One day, right? One
Um,
day.
but that shouldn't be, if you are a true blue creative like me and all you know how to do is tell stories, that should not be a deterrent. Milo, oh, the beast has awoken.
Hey, hey, Milo, right?
Milo, what's nope, he's stretching.
All right, no problem. We're fine. It's fine to have an audience, have others join the conversation. So all good.
But then, my
Yeah.
other piece of advice would be, I as a creative, you're going to be hired to do things every once in a while that, you might not be wild about, but you have to find ways of getting yourself excited in order to do it. You might find yourself in a situation where you're getting, a ton of notes and it can feel demoralizing. Always have something of your own that you are working on the side that you are passionate about, because at the end of the day you'll get a bunch of notes about this thing and it's like, oh god, I can't believe I have to make all these changes. At least I have my baby over here, and it's like your emotional support project. And I think that's important for any creator to know, that I might not be able to express myself exactly the way I want to here, but I can over here.
I love that you said that. Yeah, it's always good for people to have their passion projects.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes, and oftentimes those end up being the big real deal projects at the end of the day.
yeah, those two. You gotta do those things that make you happy. In the end of the day, like you said. All right, but speaking of all the comic books, you've been giving us quite a bit of advice. But are there any comic books that you collect? Is there anything on your? Do you have any a pool list? Do you go to the comic shop? Do you get any comics? Or
I really leave it open when I go into a comic book shop. I really like to see what's eye grabbing. I always like to trade comics with fellow creators that I meet along the way. In terms of like all-time favorites, I don't know if you're familiar with Motherland.
Some
Um,
of the others in the Codex have mentioned it before.
yeah, I've mentioned that in interviews before. That was there have been a few comics that when I was starting out changed the way that I thought about comic books completely. That was one of them, and it's because the storytelling, the emotional resonance of this very very high concept story completely punched me in the face, and I thought, oh my god, I did not know you could do that with storytelling. Um, oh, another one that I just devoured, and I didn't even mean to. Um, oh my goodness, wait, why am I'm forgetting the name of this now.
But as you find
But
it, I will say that I
it's
got to
the
check out Motherland. I'll have to check it out.
oh, it's tremendously beautiful. Okay, hang on. What is this?
And in the meantime, I could let everybody know that you could all find Olivia on Instagram right there, right under me. Olivia C. Briggs. And don't forget to check us. Everybody at the Codex Station, you can check us all out at the Codex Station.
I got it.
All right.
Sex criminals.
Sex Criminal sounds pretty interesting.
Did you have you ever read it?
I've heard of the name. It does sound familiar. I haven't
Oh,
picked it up, but
okay.
it sounds interesting.
It's kind of adorable, even though it doesn't sound like it. It's about a couple that can freeze time when they orgasm, and then they go like they start like robbing banks and stuff. But that's just where it starts. But what I loved about it really is it's a relationship story, and it's about these two that are clearly meant to be together. I mean, they stop time together. They both have the same weird thing that they've been experiencing since they were kids, but they're having a lot of trouble just making it work on the human level. And those are the stories I love, where you have this high concept hook that's really just an excuse to tell a human story. And that was another one that really illuminated me to what comic books could do. Another comic book series I loved was Witches with a Y,
Okay.
that I know a lot of people have read. That one was pretty popular. And yeah, I mean, I continue to find new comics that I find really really thrilling and interesting. But again, as we've already said, it's the comic book world is so open and accepting that I think, at least now, where we really are in a golden age where there's no limit to the types of stories that you can tell. So it's an exciting time to be involved. It's also almost impossible to keep up.
Oh yeah, there's just so many
So
beautiful
much.
stories out there. I'm like, I'm checking out this one and that one, and then I'm like, I'll get to this one, and then it's like, okay, 5 years have already passed and I haven't read it yet. So
Yep.
yeah, but a great time. Hey, I'd rather be spoiled with so many comic books as opposed to not having anything.
Yes. An
Yeah.
embarrassment of riches, as they say.
Yeah. So a little bit, you were alluding to some upcoming projects, but are there any upcoming projects that you really would like to talk about more?
Oh, I would
If you can
love
share it
to,
with
but I
us.
can't because they're
Okay.
not announced yet. I know it's like it's such a bummer. I think actually there's a book that I have. The first issue is supposed to be coming out in January. It's not announced yet, but it is with Mad Cave Studios. And so I won't tell you the title or anything, but I am so excited for this book and this series because um I mean, in every single thing that I write, I always try. I'm always tackling something that I am currently dealing with in whatever character arc, or a lot of times the theme will depend on something that I'm struggling with myself. Because it writing should be honest, and there's how are you supposed to connect with your readers if you're not being honest with them? So that's always been really important to me. But this book, I had pitched the basic concept of it to the folks over at Mad Cave Studios. They were very interested in it and they wanted to see an outline. But when the time came to write the outline, I was in such a dark place that I thought the only way that I'm going to be able to write this is if I pour everything that I am dealing with into this. And I did. And it wasn't just what I was currently dealing with, it was the frustrations I had been feeling about my career, the frustrations that I was feeling about being a woman, and being, again, the whole 90s thing is coming up again, being raised with this notion of like, don't worry, kid, like we took care of all this for you. There's no more glass ceiling anymore. You have nothing to worry about. There's no limitations. You can do whatever you want now. And just realizing that all of that was bullshit. And just, you know, kind of being furious at the world, but at the same time so badly just wanting to make my mark on it in such a sincere way, while being a mother and wanting to raise a strong, resilient child who saw opportunity everywhere, and wanting to shield her from the anger that I was feeling and the new relationship that I was in and what was happening there. And so I got really, really deep and personal with this book. And the process of seeing it come to life. Martina Niosi is the artist on this book. And what she has done is like, I get chills thinking, it's so incredibly gorgeous and beyond my wildest dreams for what this book could be. So I can't tell you the concept. I cannot tell you the name of the book, but I can tell you that I don't think that I've ever been more excited to get something on shelves. And I think it's the most directly I have ever spoken to my readers, and the most honest I've ever been on the page. So that's one book that's coming out in January. And then I have another book that I also can't talk about, also with Maverick, another graphic novel. So it's in the YA space. And it's my first romantic comedy, so I'm very excited about that. And again, I can't tell you the concept or the name of the book, but I can tell you that it has been pitched back to me as a queer 13 going on 30. And that is like the highest compliment that anyone could give me. So I actually, when I get off with you, I have to start writing the second chapter of that. So I'm really excited about that one too.
Well, enjoy. Yeah. So upcoming, we'll just say upcoming OCB comic book
Yeah.
stories coming out, in January, and then the other story that you're going to be writing later today.
Yep.
No set date for when that one will come out.
No, we don't have a date for that one yet. Probably in a couple months we will. We'll have a pub date.
Okay, well that sounds good. And speaking of projects, do you have, before I let you go, do you have any dream projects? Anything that you're like, I've always dreamed of working on this?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I have a lot of dream projects. But I swear, I don't want to like pitch the audience ideas for things that I want to write about. But I will say I've been very inspired by this first season of Fallout. I think that show is stunning for so many reasons, and the storytelling is so awesome and on point. I'm actually, oh gosh, there's so many things I can't talk about. This is so hard. Because I'm kind of working on a dream project right now with a fellow creator. I'll say that I'm developing a project with Steven D'Souza right now, who I love dearly. He's the writer of Die Hard and Commando. And he's been writing the Sheena comics with Dynamite for the past 15, 20 years now, something like that.
Okay, yes. Upcoming projects.
But yeah, I mean, I really, really, really want an Image book. I mean, that's a huge dream of mine. But that company, the recognition that their books get, just how wonderful and creative and individualistic they are. I find so many times, I even kick myself because there's so many times that I find myself like in a comic book store and I'm like, ooh, what's that? And it's always an Image book. And I'm like, ah. So I haven't made any overtures to them yet. I'm really waiting to like build my catalog before I approach them with anything. Because I kind of want to be a shoe-in. That's a dream of mine. And then I just want to do it once. Just one time. I want to do something either at Marvel or DC that like I want to throw my hand in the ring for one of these like classic superhero characters and carrying on one of these stories. I only need to do it once, and that would be enough for me. But I think that would be so cool to be a part of that universe. Yeah. So that's, yeah. But again, I have so many dream projects. You have no idea how many supplements I take a day at this point, because I realized a couple years ago that there's no way that I'm going to be able to tell all the stories that I want to tell unless I live to like 150. So I'm desperately trying
I know the
to live
feeling.
forever.
I try not to think about that too much, but yeah.
Yes, I cannot get hit by a bus, and I can't. Natural causes cannot catch up with me anytime soon because I need to be here forever. I really do.
Yeah. Well, I get what you mean. Yeah, but there's so many projects, but good to, like I said, good to have so many that we're excited about as opposed to having
Yes.
none.
Yes. Oh my God, that'd be horrible. I can't even imagine what that's like. People ask me about writer's block, and all I say to them, this is all I know of writer's block, which is a literal block that says writer's block on it. I can't imagine a world where I sit at my computer, I don't know what to write about. I'm very, very lucky in that regard. Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, thank you, Olivia, for joining us. Everybody, I do want to say that you can find Olivia on Instagram at Olivia C. Briggs. And if you were looking, you can see it right under me. And then you can catch us at the CODEX station. You can catch us on all the socials at the CODEX station. And then also, you can check us out at thecodexstation.com, get some merch, meet the team, and so much more. Once again, Olivia, is there anything you would like to say before we finish this interview up?
Sure. For all of you Winx fans out there, and Fate Winx fans, I hope you love the book. And if you do, follow me on Instagram. I'm doing one giveaway today. We just got the winner, and I will be announcing that shortly. But every once in a while, I have giveaways of signed books, and I will send them to you free. So check it out. And yeah, and please always, always, always let me know what you think of what I've written. I'm As long as it's not like scary, negative, and attacking, I'm always down to engage. And I really do like to know what readers are thinking, particularly when it comes to Fate the Winx Saga, because this was continued because of the fans. So it is important for me as a creator and for the greater team at Maverick to know what the fans think. So always share your opinion. I almost always respond. I even check the little, mailbox where stuff goes that no one ever sees. I'm in there too. So please feel free to share your thoughts. And yeah, thank you for reading.
All right. Well, thank you again for joining us. Once again, everyone, thank you for joining us. This has been a special Codex Station presentation. I, Sonny Kruger, was interviewing Olivia Cuartero-Briggs. Olivia Cuartero-Briggs. I was getting there. I was rolling it, and then I
That's
missed
okay.
it.
No, that's a cool last name too.
Well, thank you for joining us, Olivia, and good luck on all of your projects. And
Thank you.
I'll
You
be
too.
looking forward to checking them out. Thank you very much. So, everybody, thank you. Take care.